having me. I feel like I haven't seen your face in years.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, because our paths crossed, I think, many years ago, and you and Kimmy, who I'm sure we'll talk about later, would come and join us on stage here in Las Vegas on occasion and perform with Sarah and Matt, and it was just such a grand time, and I always have fond memories
So
of that
fun.
experience. Yeah.
I love that. We loved coming out and doing shows and seeing you guys perform. Like, it was a blast.
Well, and you're always welcome to come back, so I'll just throw that out here.
Thanks.
So I want to thank you for joining me today. I've followed your progression through the arts, if you will, not only during your time when you came to visit here, but beyond. So I want to quickly start with a bit of your life history. I know you kind of grew up on the East Coast.
So I grew up in Staten Island, New York,
Nice.
which is part of New York City, but still is like suburban.
Right.
It has like all the worst parts of both things, suburbs and city. But I grew up there, normal childhood. I really, when I was little, wanted to be an actor. My parents were really determined to make that not happen. They were like, that's not practical, and you're not gonna like miss school for auditions and all that. So I basically did school plays, church plays, did dancing school. And then in high school, went to Martha Graham, the dance studio in the city. So finally I got to go to Manhattan and take dance classes on the weekends, and took some acting classes there. But all the while, like going to, like, even my high school was like an engineering based high school. It's one of those nerd schools called Staten Island Tech. And now you have to test into it. But I just had to like have good grades. But we studied like architecture and engineering and robotics and electronics. $100 was basically given to do a play. So we would make all our own props and costumes and sets, because the play was like the last thing anybody cared about. But I went to school with Ingrid Michaelson, who's a popular singer. And so her and I would pool our resources creatively, and we're determined to perform even while doing, architectural writing during the day.
Oh my God, this is wonderful. I didn't know. I didn't know this aspect about your history. So, if the acting bug hadn't caught, what was your trajectory going to be? You believe?
I probably would have been a teacher, like a math teacher. I was really good at math. My dad taught math and computer programming. My mom worked in the computer lab at the school that I went to. And yeah, that's kind of what they thought I was going to do. I was good at that, but I just always wanted to act. Like, even when I was very little, I was like, I want to write for commercials. Like, cause I think I just thought like, oh, that would be fun. Even with going to college, I went to college in New Jersey, and my parents wanted me to major in education there. And I wasn't, like, we were, limited by finances. So I couldn't apply to like NYU or any of the fancy schools. So I secretly like went behind their back and applied for the BFA in acting.
Good for
and
you.
Got in.
Do it. No, congratulations. That's awesome. So I kind of want to spin this now. So we cross paths because you're a phenomenal improviser, if I may say. And I always feel so supported or felt supported when you would come and perform with us on stage here in Las Vegas. So I want to, in that history, when did you discover improv, and where, and what was that like?
So actually, it's like right where we're at. So basically, when I was looking at colleges,
yes.
I went to a thing called Theater Day at Montclair State and got to see plays and participate in the acting classes there. And that's where I met Matt Donnelly. He was a freshman. I was a senior in high school. Him and my friend Jim Fistante, they were in the freshman acting class, and we got to just like participate for the day, for Theater Day. And it was improv.
Nice.
Well, I got to do an improv scene with Matt and Jim, and just like fell in love with it. And then, and really was like, oh, that would be so fun to get to do improv in my first year of college. Like, that would just be such a blast. And I had such a great time doing a scene with them. And I remember the scene. Matt was like tossing a ball to me, like pretend ball. And we were playing catch, and he tossed the ball, and like I would do in normal life. It's a fake ball, but he tosses the ball and I just watch it land on the ground. And Matt talks about that. Like, he's like, that was so funny. Cause like in real life, you can't catch a ball, but in improv, you could have just caught the ball, but I just let it fall and it created a character and it was really fun. And, so then I saw the improv group Possible Side Effects, which I eventually joined. I saw them perform at the freshman orientation.
Nice.
And I went right up to Matt and I was like, how do I join your group? And he's like, we're not taking any new people. So I sat front row of every show once I started college, basically stalked them, would go to the diner with them after. Then they started teaching improv classes. I took every class, just like hung out with them. And 2 months later, they added me to the group. And so that's, I started performing improv when I was 18 and that was before UCB was in New York. So we were just like doing all this really awesome, like fun improv in Montclair. And we would do short form games, but then we also started exploring long form out there before we took classes, elsewhere.
And for viewers, there's always kind of a very gray line, not even a gray line, but differentiation between short form and long form. So where does the Pit or People's Improv Theater fit into all of this? Did that come about later or?
Yeah, that was later. So first we all did classes at the UCB, which is Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York City, got on teams at the UCB. After college, I was performing there. And then when it became clear, like there were certain people that were kind of getting promoted to get to teach at UCB, and it just seemed like that was never going to happen for me at UCB, just like when my place in the world there. And so when the Pit opened, Matt started teaching there, and I, at the time, it was early 2000s. At the time, women, were still really looked down upon, I guess, or just like not treated as equals to the men in the improv scene. And so at the theater, most of the teachers were men. And the only female teacher was teaching what was called level 0, which was called level fun. And it was like your first introduction if you've never done acting or anything before. And it's a really fun class, but there were no females teaching above level 0. And I really wanted to teach. And I'd been doing improv at that point for like almost 10 years. And so I created a women's workshop because I saw the UCB was doing one.
Nice.
And so then I was like, I'm going to do one called the ladies room. And they gave me that class. And then after that class was successful, they gave me a level 1. And then I started teaching level 1, level 4. And then I would do, I was on like the committee to make teams and performing with the faculty. And Kimmy was the other gal. At the time, it was basically Kimmy and I, the only 2 gals that were in the faculty show. And so that's how I really started performing with Kimmy, who's in the Apple Sisters with me, and eventually on Glow.
Well, we'll talk about Apple Sisters and Glow here in a moment, but I appreciate your going down this path because I often lament this because improv is a very male-dominated art form. So I thank you for weaving your story into this and taking charge and creating something there at the Pit and making something happen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's still male, like comedy is still male, but it's definitely a different time now. And now when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about including, diversifying in terms of race and ability. We need to diversify in all ways, but definitely when I was starting, it was a very white male thing. There'd be a team of 8 people, 6 would be guys, 2 would be girls. And that was pretty standard. And now that's more equal, but now we're talking about in the comedy world, like making sure that we're also diversifying in all the other ways. And it's not finished.
The work is not done. And I'll be honest, I don't, we're already off topic and I have a million other questions here that I want to ask, but we're going down a tangent, which I don't mind. I hope you don't either. But
no, I don't care.
Even as a gay man, I'm like, do I have a seat at the table here? And it feels intimidating. Improv can be very intimidating when you're amongst fellow players that you respect and admire, but you kind of feel othered at times. And I want to touch on
Oh,
this
yeah.
because based on my experience with you and for our viewers, improv, you can catch the ball or observe it fall, and we all have to say yes to it. And you also have the ability to play opposite gender, which I do frequently. What's
Mm-hmm.
your experience with that? Or what's your go-to, Rebekka?
Yeah, I played all different genders. I mean, I'm sure that there was a time where it was like very stereotypical. Like often I would be playing men that were like douchebags, but I guess that was like my way of working out my shit.
Understood.
But yeah, I feel like we can play anything in improv, as long as we're not just being stereotyped. So when I taught improv, I would try to encourage people to, be thoughtful. When men played women, be thoughtful about it. Or you're playing someone who happens to be gay, not make the joke being gay. I think playing other races is difficult because it tends to lend itself to stereotypes. And so I feel like that's tricky at this point, but it's been a while now since I performed and since I taught. It's probably been like 4 years.
I want to go ahead and transition now to, you mentioned Kimmy, the pit, and I think Sarah Lowe gets woven into this story. There was something born during this time that I got to experience here in Vegas because you're part of a trio that developed between the three of you. So tell me about that.
Basically, Sarah, I met her because she started dating Matt Donnelly, and Matt was like one of my best friends. And her and I just really connected like comedically. And so we were talking about doing a show together. And then separately, Kimmy and I, as I said before, were the only 2 women in the faculty show. And so we were talking about doing a show together. And I was like, I'm lazy. I can't do 2 shows. We have to do 1 show. And so I was about to introduce them to discuss like what are we going to do as a trio, and Sarah was randomly like doing a show in LA, like she had to go do Urinetown or something in LA. So our first meeting was on the phone, and we started talking about what we like, and we all discovered that we really like musical comedy, and that I was thinking it might be fun if we like hosted a variety show. And Kimmy was like, oh, the 1940s is perfect because it's 3-part harmony. Sarah, her mother was a performer, and her mom and her best friend were to be in these Broadway shows. And they're like, they would just call themselves the Apple Sisters. Like they didn't do anything with it, but she's like, we should do that. And they would put in their bio that they were like Candy and Seedy from the Apple Sisters. So we were like, let's just steal that. Because Sarah was like, maybe we need a better name than that. And we're like, that's the perfect name. Like New York City, 3-part harmony radio show, sisters, the Apple Sisters is perfect. So we created the Apple Sisters, and originally it was going to be more of a variety show where we would like host and have people come out. And ultimately we ended up just having so much fun writing almost in an episodic nature. Each month we'd write a new show, new songs. We'd always be the Apple Sisters, always be like starting out to try to do this perfect radio show. Something gets screwed up. There's slapstick comedy, food all over the place, singing and dancing. All the while we have red lipstick on and our red, yellow, and green dresses. And we did that at the Pit. And then we did it at festivals around the country and Montreal Just for Laughs. And once we went to Just for Laughs, we got agents and managers who kind of recommended that we move to LA. And that's sort of set us off to moving to LA. Sarah got Jersey Boys in Vegas, so she called the moving company and was like, actually move it to Vegas. Kimmy and I continued on to LA.
Right.
Like Sarah is naturally more uptight.
Believe me, I know. I've worked with her on stage and off.
So her character's uptight. I love being like a crazy asshole, so I'm more of a character. And Kimmy is a slut. No, I'm just kidding. But she really loves to play like the dumb blonde, into the dumb blonde stereotype, even though she's like one of the smartest, hardworking people I know. But so we kind of put those characters into like archetypes. I was sort of like the Rosie the Riveter. Also, just playing with that, taking the Rosie the Riveter up a notch to because it's kind of a feminist lesbian icon like thing. So I was like, oh, if she was a lesbian, have to be closeted. So getting to play with that archetype. And so that's with my character. And then in terms of our personalities, like Sarah grew up around musical theater. Her grandma was a musical theater actress. Her mother, her dad worked in the business. Like everybody was in the business. So she really had all this like musical knowledge. Kimmy had been writing comedy music songs and was like obsessed with music. I had been writing sketch comedy and doing all this improv. So we just sort of came together in that way. And when we first started, we would, if you looked at our like Google Calendar, like 27 out of 30 days were dedicated to Apple Sisters. Like we had every day we were together writing a new song, rehearsing the show that was up that month, writing the show that was going the next month. And it was like an amazing incubation, like creatively, to come up with 50 songs and over 15 versions of the show. And we added some improv elements into it, but really we get to update it. So every year when we do like the spring show, there's certain elements of it that we update based on what's going on in politics, and we just filter it through the 1940s. And so it was just like the best time when we were creating it. And then now we still do shows maybe like once or twice a year. And we'll typically do the shows we've done before, but we update them. And so it's fun to like go back to it. But eventually we'd like to write a new show. It's just now the three of us are so busy, but besides just having kids, like just our careers are at a place where it makes it a lot more difficult to have the time and energy to put into a really fun project.
You created a short film a few years ago that got many accolades, directed by Kimmy Gatewood. It's titled Consent. And what can you tell us about that, and if you don't mind sharing what that journey was for you?
Sure. Basically, like Kimmy and I were on Glow, the obviously Netflix show, and just getting the experience of being around all these amazing like female writers, producers, directors, and also feeling like I needed something for myself, like something on my own. And the Me Too movement happened. And basically the thing that happened specifically was that when the Aziz Ansari story broke about his date and the woman's feelings in the moment of feeling like she had to do sexual things she didn't want to, I had a couple conversations with a couple different straight dudes who were like, I don't know what the big deal is. It's just a bad date. That's just a normal date. One guy who was actually a PA on something I was shooting was like, if you think that's rape, then I should be in jail because I've done that a million times. And I was like, I think you shouldn't say that. And I'm going back to work. I was like in the middle of shooting. And I didn't even say I thought it was rape. So I didn't say that. I just said I thought it was wrong. You ask, why didn't she leave? I say, why didn't he stop? All I said was that. And I wanted to talk about the gray area that was sort of just brushed under the rug. And the gray area, and why the gray area is so traumatizing for victims of sexual coercion and assault, when it's not something that you're going to go to the cops for, but it is something that makes you feel like shit. And so I was really trying to come up with like, how can I write about this in a way that's going to make the people who perpetrate it understand? And there's something in improv called a mapping scene, and it's where you replace the details of a normal situation, like a well-known sort of plot. You replace those details with something mundane, but you keep the emotional arc.
Sure.
So I decided to take a date, sexual assault, coercion situation, gray area, replace the sexual nature of it. And I was like, what can I replace it with? And I have a list where I wrote millions of things I could replace it with. And I was like, oh, I'm going to flip the genders, make the victim a white male, I'll play the aggressor, but I don't want it to be sexual. And I figured, oh, what if it's a person who's a singer
Mm-hmm.
who won't stop singing to a guy? So the guy shows interest in her singing, so she just assumes he constantly wants to hear her sing. And then, I follow the map of she shows up at his house, she leaves messages singing, she ends up sleeping over, he feels like he needs to like allow her to listen, allow her to sing. She ends up sleeping over. In the morning, she does something nice for him and he thinks, oh, maybe she's not so bad. And then she sings again.
Yeah.
And so following the map of that, and because it's singing, because it's me as the aggressor, I don't feel like it's as triggering because you're never really worried for his safety. But you get the details and it's all gray area. It was really gratifying to make it. I starred in it. I wrote music for it. And I wrote lyrics that could be kind of like double entendre for the themes of the short. I had Kimmy direct it.
Yeah.
And which was amazing, especially with my first time starring in something that I wrote. We had a great like mind melding situation where we totally got on the same page. And then we did festivals and it was like such a good experience. And I had so many people kind of come up to me, the targeted audience, so many people being like, I never thought of it that way. Like, and in fact, some people who were some of the people that I had the conversations with ahead of time saw it and were like, wow, I get it. Like, and not realizing that they had inspired it. So I feel like that's such a like piece close to my heart because I really wanted to make people understand why sexual coercion is so hard for women and why it's hard in the moment to do the thing that you think people should do, which is just leave or just say fuck you. It's like that's not what happens in that moment. You want it to go away and you want everything to be fine. And especially if you kind of like the person and they turn on you, you don't want it to become a mess.
At the very least, you created a foundation and framework for people to dialogue about it and see a different perspective, which I think is huge. So thank you, Rebekka Johnson, for consent. If someone wants to see it now, is it possible to, I know it did the film festival circuit, is there a way that a viewer could check it out if they're interested?
Yeah, you could go to consentcomedy.com.
Okay.
And it's on there.
I was reflecting on your IMDb credits, and it's like Rebekka Johnson, nurse. And I'm like, oh yeah. So